Director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at Consul General of India in Durban, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Mr. Haroun Hansrot, Dr. Sheetal Bhoola, Mr. Sipire Mchunu, Mr. Piyush Khandelwal, distinguished guests, online viewers, namaskar and welcome to the fourth episode of Pravasi Samvaad or Diaspora Dialogue. Indeed, today we will be interacting with a very talented, vibrant gentleman who needs no introduction, indeed, and that is Mr. Haroun Hansrot, a very famous South African couturier and fashion designer, a man with many skills in his cap. We'll be interacting with the very dynamic Dr. Sheetal Bhoola, who is a UKZN academician and a diaspora expert. So, just a brief background about Harunji. Harunji's love affair with fashion began way back when he was a little boy, as he would sit with his mom, who was a popular dressmaker at the time, and who would turn ordinary pieces of fabric into something of such great beauty. He knew that he had this inner talent or magic to give to the fashion world and bring to many beautiful people as well. Watching the South Africa pageant and the Durban July and the Miss World pageants as a little boy, uh, he was delighted and was inspired to be a designer. He would look at the fashion and think, wow, not realizing that someday it would be his fashions that would be exhibited and people would go, wow. So just further about Harunji has more than a decade in the fashion industry and has become any synonymous with decadent designs, flowing uh, fabrics, exquisite fashion events where he incorporates the East and the West. His designs have featured on TV shows such as Top Billing, Eastern Mosaic, and has worked with many international designers, celebrities, and fashion houses. So, for this interaction on Pravasi Samvad episode 4, we welcome the very dynamic Mr. Haroun Hansrot and Dr. Sheetal Bhoola.
Thank you. Thank you so much for gracing us with your time, your presence here today. And
good morning, and thanks to you.
No, and also we're living in this time frame where everything, the famous slogan goes, time is money. So gratitude and dhanyavad. And I think you've got a lot to share with us. You've had various kinds of international exposure. You've had Eastern exposure, Western exposure, and you had an interesting journey in terms of growth as a courtier. Tell us, how do you understand life as a courtier? Personally, what is life about for you?
I think life for me is living day by day. As a creative type, we find inspiration in everything, every movement, every color, every sensation around us. And I think being a designer, you have this intuition into people, you have an intuition into people's souls. I think creative types tend to appreciate more than others, without generalizing. And I think we find beauty in just about everything that we do, and it's all about detail.
Oh, wow, absolutely. So when you talk about soulfulness, you talk about soul connectivity, and if we can divert to your spiritual dimension in your life, the spiritual influence on your career, you think you can share a word or two with us?
I think.
What do you draw from your spirituality? Sorry to cut you.
I think my journey, like most creatives, it's an innate thing. When you're a fashion designer, it comes from within. And I always knew that I was going to end up in the creative field. As a little boy, I think you live by the glamour of fashion. You want to be part of a fashion show. I had bucket lists as a little boy. I always wanted to design for the July. I always wanted to design for Miss South Africa, the Miss World, celebrities. And throughout my journey, studying on a fashion design course here, then earning myself an Italian government scholarship, which took me to Florence and Rome for 4 years. Spending time there and spending time away, you tend to start connecting yourself with people around you, family around you, and you find things that are actually quite important. And then you reach a stage in your life like the pandemic, and then you start joining all the dots. And I think it's part of the glamour, it's part of who we are, it's part of humankind. I think it's part of just being a human and just connecting to people, I think, which brings, I think, the creativity in one aspect. And I think coming from an Indian background and being spiritual like most of us are, you start understanding what's important in life. And yes, you can be a designer and you can be part of glamour, but at the same time, you need to connect to people, which to me, I think the pandemic has definitely brought that to most.
And if we look in the current context and looking back and let's reflect, I mean, we've read widely about your accolades internationally, all the international recognition you've achieved, being so important for me to make mention of this now. The fact that you've actually represented the South African Indian diaspora within the frame of couture world on the international platform, that alone is something to be in awe of. And so you've had a very interesting, a very fulfilling journey. Tell us the highs, the lows, the excitement, the growth that's come with it.
I think for me, growing up in South Africa, we always looked to Europe. We always looked to Paris. We always looked to Rome. And I never really thought that it would actually happen until it did. And for me, representing South Africa on an international platform, and more so being an Indian, South African Indian, was really special to me. Taking my culture, taking my heritage along, the fine detailing of Indian intricacies in embroidery, and then fusing that with Western and studying in Europe, studying in Italy for me was great. So I had this melting pot of cultures, textures, all that was quite important. I had the skills of learning about Indian embroidery before growing up as a kid, and then learning the art of draping, which is like an Italian technique, and then bringing these together, threading these, stitching these threads together. That to me was very special. And then from Italy, coming back to South Africa, then I represented, as a South African designer, I had the opportunity of showcasing in Mauritius for the very first Fashion Week in Mauritius. So I represented South Africa. I worked with the likes of Manish Malhotra and all the other Indian designers, Hemant Trivedi. So it was actually it was quite an honor for me, because here you are growing up and you like aspiring to be like these international designers, and then you have to share the platform. So Mauritius Fashion Week was very special for me. And moving on from Mauritius Fashion Week, I showcased at Goa Fashion Week, at the Indian Fashion Week, and that was really special. I was the only African designer, and watching the Indian designers work, Indian designers from India, and then being a South African Indian designer was very interesting, because they would come with all the techniques of different embroideries, like the chicken work, the Zardozi work, and then I tried to do what I have been trained to do. But you learn so much from others. You learn different techniques, you learn different trends. So showcasing in India was also very special. And then I've also showcased in Germany. And that's when I've actually used lots of Indian techniques. I've actually used the sari as my base. So I created a whole Grecian come Indian theme, which most Grecians think they created the whole sort of drape look. But it's actually quite an Indian form. And we can drape a sari in so many different ways as opposed to the Greeks. So that was also quite interesting. That was also very touching for me. Showcasing in Italy has always been special to me. So, I've had wonderful highs, and then the other high was showcasing at Sun City at an event called Positive. And Positive was a culmination of all the art. It was art, fashion, food, music, and I shared my ramp, my fashion show with Seal, which is an international singer. So that was very special. And I had the likes of Versace collection on ramp with me, Roberto Cavalli, locals like Gavin Raja, which was also quite influential in my life and special, and I've learned from everyone along the way. So Positive was a wonderful platform for me to showcase. And then with South Africa, I've been on the panel for many years. I've judged South Africa. I've worked as a scout. I've designed. And then came the big break for me when I designed and I judged Miss World. And that was very special. So there I was in Johannesburg. Priyanka Chopra was there as well. It was quite a highlight for me. And then designing for celebrities, I've designed for the likes of Gordon Ramsay, which was very interesting. I designed his chef's jacket. So that had nuances of Indian embroidery mixed with African embroidery beads. So I use Indian technique of embroidery and I use African beads. So I thought that would be very special because South African is South African, but I'm still an Indian South African. You know, this is what makes us so unique. We're not just African, we're Indian South African. So I love the idea of using Indian techniques and experimenting with different sort of textures and beads. So designing for Gordon Ramsay, designing for, if you talk about Bollywood, Bipasha Basu was also very special because I had to work with her. I showcased in Cape Town, and then she purchased from my Cape Town collection, which was quite special. And my last interesting bout was designing for Sophia, the world's first robot, artificial intelligence, and she's graced the covers of international magazines, and she's also has had clothes designed by Indian designers. And here I was as a South African designer designing for her, but a South African Indian designer. So there as well, I used my embroidery as in Indian embroidery in one of the evening gowns, and then I did a very Western silhouette for her. So when you talk about highs, it's wonderful to be part of an international platform. It's wonderful to be part of the glitz and glamour, but at the same time, one needs to connect with one's inner self. Being creative, you tend to have, like I mentioned previously, you have this intuition into people's soul. You need to identify with different types of personalities you're dealing with. When someone comes to you and wants a very special gown, it's your signature on their personality. So you need to connect with people. You need to understand different personalities and weave your way around the person's inner being to be able to bring out the best in a person. One of the subjects that I had studied was sociology of fashion, where you need to understand a certain personality, and the garment you design would either have shades to bring out the personality or subdue someone that's quite out there. So you need to find a balance within people and your surroundings. And I think culture also plays an important part. I think we tend to be quite grounded as Indians in our upbringing. So you tend to go as far as you want to be glamorous and to lead a really extravagant lifestyle. But at the same time, I think your connection with people around you ground you. To me, this has always been an important and integral part of my designing and my being. So as I go back to the pandemic, which I think most creatives need to understand, there's a business acumen about designing, and there's a creative part. And then the biggest part of all, which I always look to Bollywood stars, they have a shelf life that's very limited, but it doesn't just end there. For example, you could be a Kareena Kapoor, who could be a wonderful twinkle star, and then she gets married, and then she reinvents herself as a director and producer. So one cannot quite be stagnant in your journey through fashion and being creative. One needs to understand the art of reinventing yourself. I mean, it comes through beautifully as Bollywood stars do, and as well as always look through Madonna. I mean, the art of reinventing is optimum, I think. And with this, I've taken couturier, being a couturier, and I had to halt, stop, introspect, and then have an overall holistic view of fashion. And I think this is where I've teamed up with a young businessman who had a company and designed ready to wear. So I've taken his product, which is called Modak, and we've taken it to another level where we started designing a whole Pret collection. And this Pret collection now is accessible to masses, and it's available at chain stores. So you need to actually start looking at things differently, especially during this time where people are not spending on an evening gown, But like I was speaking earlier on, and I've mentioned that it's about a lifestyle now. It's about being at home. It's about being in touch with your family, getting up, spending more time, but still being at the office, which now becomes from home. So your clothing needs to be versatile, where you need to be able to layer from a very easygoing garment to looking as if you're ready for the office. So one has to reinvent looking at designing your collections, looking at clients, looking at people's lifestyles. And, I think we've also reached a stage where we have to understand people and where we are at the moment. When you talk about pandemic and you talk about people being unemployed, this is a project that I've actually started working on here at Modan, where we're trying to take people that have been working and looking to actually find a source of income. So we're training domestics, especially, or people that need to be employed, and to teach them the art of stitching, basic knowledge of putting things together, just to be able to start a lifestyle for them and afford a lifestyle, which everybody wants at the moment. So I started this little CSI program, and it's taking a little traction, but we're hoping for it to actually become an international thing, where we want to do more programs of doing exchange programs for designers from India coming here. We're going to India, we're going to Europe, trying to teach different people different skills to be able to afford themselves. So lots have learned from the highs and lows of life, and lots of introspection has come with it.
No, and I think very commendable as well. I mean, your economic contribution to our society here at large, even outside of the diaspora. And, you're talking about the versatility of clothing and how our lifestyle has changed. And we're also now looking at different looks we're going to be carrying in the day. And I myself, you shuffle into the kitchen, from the kitchen, I'm shuffling to my office. So how would you term this look this morning?
I think you're looking absolutely glamorous, and I love the look. I love the versatility of the look, and maybe you can give us a little more how you feel in the garment, because it's actually a wonderful piece that we've designed. That's absolutely exactly what I'm speaking about, where you can layer stuff on.
So, if I'm not mistaken, this features, I think, our coutier's handwork, all of embroidery, and of course, layer on, layer off. And I think here also you see a fusion of what has always been traditional, Western, African. And I see in this piece as well, for me, after receiving it from you, I see this melting pot of influences that has come with your diverse experience over the years. So gracious today, I feel like a complete queen. And all it's taken is just this one piece. So I think this is going to be a whole new future for online conferencing. This whole new look,
I think this is
and taking it off, and it's comfortable, it's versatile, it's giving you the zhuzh and the glamour, and then of course when you don't need it, it's simple, off and on.
I think as South Africans, we actually need to understand where we're going through with our lifestyles. We lead a life that's extremely busy. Most women especially today's moms, want to be hands-on. So you are a career woman, you're a wife, and you're a mother. So you're spending time at the office, and then you're fetching kids, and then you're going back to the office, and then you're dropping kids off, and then you need to go to a cocktail party. So for me, what was so important was learning the tricks and the glamour quotient that's actually required from an everyday life. So you could wear something extremely simple, glamorize it with just a collar, exactly as Dr. Bhoola is wearing. So you glamorize it, you get into your car, you can actually do your makeup, just applique your little collar on, ready to go for a cocktail party, take it off, go back to the office. So you actually afford your lifestyle in being very low maintenance to the whole effect of dressing up and dressing down, and still be able to carry out your day's duty. And you look glamorously beautiful, Dr. Bhoola.
Well, thank you to you, and gratitude, and of course, appreciation to you for today's glamour point on the interview.
Welcome.
Back to your life journey. Now, we've spoken extensively about your highs. Anything in particular you want to talk about when it's come to your challenges? And I think, people often express their highs, they express their achievements, but we both know, you and I both know, there's a lot of hard work behind the scenes. It's not always easy. So, any challenges that you want to share with us that you've experienced?
I think creative beings tend to be extremely sensitive. And I think that's sometimes a downfall. You're in an arena where it's all about ego, it's all about glamour, it's all about vanity. And one little negativity you need to actually overcome and not get you down. And sometimes it's not in everyone's stride to be able to do that, especially in my case. So that's where you have to keep upping your game instead of actually just thinking. You need longevity into your career. You need to always have new ideas, because around the corner is a younger fashion designer that's upcoming and there to usurp your throne. So you got to be constantly at it. And I think being true to yourself is very important. It can get you down very easily, this whole arena of fashion and this whole game of fashion and being driven by egos. So one needs to actually understand yourself and understand your journey, where you're going to and how you're getting there. And just being able to be a good person, I think, always gets you through the day.
Absolutely. And of course, I think on any platform, national, international, competition is not easy. And I think from the outside, not having that very strong creative gene like you, but I mean, after engaging with you now, for me, I think the challenge would also be in the fact that you're constantly being compared as well with your competitors on the international market. And yet, you've got your unique juice, you've got your unique selling points, you've got your unique skills and your talent. So I can imagine how pressurizing, at the same time rewarding, at the same time growing internally. So I think, yes, the sensitivity, personality, and I think the capacity to just grow beyond that, of course, would take you further.
I must admit,
And if you
exactly
shift to
as you
values,
say, to conquer what you say. I think being born in an Indian family has its advantages, and family values and family is really important. One can get quite caught up in this whole arena of fashion and this whole game, as I've said. But family tends to ground you. Family tends to take away that stress of the high life of the fashion industry. I tend to spend a lot of time with family, and you express yourself creatively differently, like in the kitchen, for example. I love gourmet foods and I love haute cuisine. So I would spend time with family and entertaining. And that's when you actually see you are not the fashion designer that you need to be portrayed to be 24/7. You can be with your family and you're not a fashion designer. You're just part of a warm feeling of being in a family. And I think, which is very prevalent in most families, in most Indian families. And I think we're quite blessed with that, where you actually take time out, you compartmentalize that and you put it aside, and then you become the human person. You become yourself. You're allowed to express yourself in the way you want to. And a lot of people wear that title and wear the cap of being a designer, and it's very difficult to take it out. And then your personality becomes quite hardened by it. I think people become quite obnoxious after a while, that you need to portray this image of being a designer. You need to portray this person. I'm upping my game all the time. And people around you become so aware of it that I've had people saying, I was so awkward to meet with you because I wasn't dressed appropriately. And I'm like, okay, understand, I am a fashion designer. I love beautiful things and I love to create beautiful things, but I find beauty in just about anything and everything. A simple thing like a street food, for example, I find its burst of flavor, burst of colors, and the way it's presented. It doesn't have to be an haute cuisine or a gourmet plated, but there's beauty in everything. And I think people need to also understand that creatives are creative and they're supposed to be glamorous and they're supposed to give off a lot of glamour, but we're just humans after all, and we just love to be around people, and people should just be themselves. And that comes through so beautifully for me from this whole stream of having a family, that everything that flows into the sea and the river is just some simplicity and just being yourself. Oftentimes away from the ramp and away from the catwalk, but just being around people that see you for who you are, and you can see people for who they are. You know, there needs to be a time and there needs to be a timeout. And for me, that discipline comes with family.
No, absolutely. So you speak about your family values. Any other values you want to share with us? That comes
well, you know, you learn through your journey in time that it's about the glamour and it's about fast pace, and then you learn the business acumen, then you learn about punctuality, then you learn other groundings, and other emphasis comes on different parts of life. So you learn to be a good human being as well, because it's no use being a fashion designer and you're unapproachable, or no use being a fashion designer and people think you're amazing, but you do not have people's skills to understand people and just to be a good human being. I think that's half the value of being a good person, and having skills, people skills. That's important to me. So you learn this a long time, that you're a designer, you're a top fashion designer, but you have a limited shelf life too. Being a good human being is forever. I think, to me, this is timeless. So you learn good values, you learn to understand people, you learn to appreciate people, especially with being a fashion designer. People take you as your brand and that's it. But they do not see that it's further than just that. It's a broader spectrum. I'm made up of staff. I'm made up of just normal people that come to work for a living, who go back to very simple homes, who go back to just normal lives. And they add the glamour quotient to me, unfortunately. People think you are just it. That's you. But I'm made up of so many different fragments, so many simple fragments, so many just good human beings, simple people. And then you get the total picture. So you have to understand them, you have to appreciate them, you have to value them. And I think this comes from being an Indian, seriously, for me. It's values that we grew up with.
Yes, and I think it stems from growing up as a young child, being taught to respect everybody, being taught to love extensively, not just love your nuclear family. We were socialized into loving our communities, loving our extended families, loving the auntie next door. And she was never just seen as a neighbor. Eventually, she became family. So
absolutely, you know, yeah, sorry.
So we always, I think, and I always highlight this as well with the diversity of people that I've encountered as well, that going back to our heritage has just given us so much more than values in life. It's given us socialization, given us experiences, it's given us enrichment, and it's also given us a very particular perception, I think, that is unique to us. And that's exactly what you've been touching on.
You know, it's so interesting that you say that. Stop this camera for 1 second. I just want to close the door. It's so interesting that you say that. I think growing up in South Africa as an Indian injected so many interesting stimuli in me. When you say that the woman next door becomes your family, and it's absolutely the way we grew up. So you will be an Indian, you will have your religious beliefs, but you're also exposed to everyone else around you. Your neighbors become your family. And any function that would happen next door, whether it's Diwali or whether it's Eid, becomes your function. And growing up as a kid, I always remember having so many more functions to attend as to my other counterparts who might not be Indian. So you're exposed to color, you're exposed to textures, you're exposed to foods and tastes and sounds. And I think all of that has brought it all out in me. I always remember growing up as a kid, and I thought, well, if we were not at the neighbor's wedding or the neighbor's cousin's wedding, you were inspired by an auntie who was draped in a sari, who looked extremely elegant, and it could be a Worth wedding gown or a Balenciaga wedding gown at the time. But the way it was draped, it looked so beautifully French. So I always grew up and watched people growing, watched my mom going out to weddings, watch neighbors and watch families, and growing up in an Indian community that was so mixed and so bound together. You were exposed to so many more weddings and functions, and I always was fascinated by the colors and and just styles of different people's makeup and hair growing up, and all of this I think has added to me. And I still have recollections as a kid and seeing my neighbor dress up in an evening gown and dressing up in her sari, and that was always so inspiring.
I think these are all the elements of the Indian culture that we're carrying through with us to the forward, even during COVID, post-COVID, all relevant. And
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Go on.
No, continue.
No, continue. I'll take
I was going to say, and if I want to shift now to your personal life, and we touched on family, and if you can share a bit about the role your friends have in your life.
I do have a very close circle of friends, and I think my bond with friends have all added different aspects of my personality. I have friends that are in drama, in theater, just people that are not even in fashion. And I think everyone adds a little bit of an element into your life. I have friends that ground me. I have friends that can just be myself. I have friends that also stimulate me when it comes to fashion. And I think for me, keeping a very small circle tends to work very well for me, but it's a very interesting mix of people.
And obviously an exchange of knowledge, a lot of intergrowth, and I think a lot of support. And I think with somebody like you that's had so much to give as well and share within your personal space to your career space as well, I can understand that value and how you would give, share, and grow together.
I think it's very important as one grows in a creative field, you always want to leave some sort of legacy behind. I think people always say you're always as good as your last gown, but to me, it's always good as what you've left for the last person behind. I worked on projects like Saris for Good Karma, where we took domestic assistants or just people that needed to earn, and we trained them to work on doing basic dressmaking skills. And then we got saris donated where they made garments and then sold these off to afford a life. And this worked really well in some of the poverty areas. I've also worked on my own projects of skills empowering women, especially to work with basic stuff like stitching on buttons or hemming garments. And I always find that you can always learn to do stuff and to earn. You know, you've got to keep improving your lifestyle and learning and teaching people. I think that's a legacy that people should always understand. That's important.
Where do you see yourself from now, 10 years down the line? Any personal visions you want to share?
Well, I do want to take my skills development program to another level. I personally feel that there's so much growth for this in South Africa, especially. We celebrated Gandhi's celebration here. And I feel our women should actually understand the value of good cotton. Good cotton, like the khadi cotton, is so fashionable overseas. We should be empowering women here to weave these cottons and then to get people that are creative and nurture this creativity in them. And hand painting, the African technique of beading is brilliant. We should be fusing that and teaching them elements of the Indian embroidery. If you look at the European market, it's saturated with Indian beading. Why can't our locals learn how to do this and fuse the African beads in the Bele beading, for example, with Indian technique, and then use these? We would be the biggest export to Europe, I think. We have the Indian knowledge, we have the African tradition. These together, we have Europe. I worked on a project during the World Cup, and I worked with the departments of art where I took local artisans who would make these bags out of buckskin, for example, and these little clutch bags. And I, on my own journey, felt I wanted to bring Manola Blahnik out of Africa. That's what my whole ethos of this project was, where I took these African skin of theirs and I spray painted it fuchsia pink, and I used crystal diamante buttons on it. And really, you would have thought you had a Jimmy Choo sandal. Really, it was made by local people from these rural areas. I took simple headbands that they make with the African fur skin, and I put crystals, I beaded onto that, I spray painted it in gold, used different distress technique, and you really thought you would have had a product out of Europe. And I had these women have little tables outside the hotels, and guests that were here for the World Cup, we're actually purchasing from them. I think South Africa has got so much to give to the world. We need to bring all our resources together. We need to skills develop people, teach them different techniques rather than the same mundane work that we have. We need to fuse both of our cultures together and create the best of the world.
Oh, wow. That sounds like such a legacy that you're going to leave behind. And I sincerely hope that we see the fruits in years to come. Any closing messages you want to leave your younger fans with? I mean, you've got a huge following out there, and there are a lot of individual youngsters as well that are also aspiring, considering the option of becoming a designer, that also want to make a mark for themselves. What have you got to share?
I think the most important thing is to be true to yourself. Creativity is a gift from God, I believe. It's creativity that comes into your soul and then you use your hands to earn. You need to understand where you're going with this. You need to make a business out of it. You need to be completely sincere to yourself and to be secure about it. And the art of sharing, I always give. What you give out, the world reciprocates. And most creative people tend to think, this is me, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to keep it grounded, closed, just keep it to myself and not share. I think the more you give out, the more you get. And the more you give out, the more you learn as well. So for me, being a designer, being an aspiring designer, just be open-minded. Just be open-minded and be able to learn from people. This is what I always say. Most designers feel that I need to be close, I'm better than the other, because it's a gift from God, you think you're creative. But the next designer is just around the corner. So be good to people, be good to yourself, and share your knowledge as well.
Thank you so much. What an honor for you to be here with us today. I mean, to share your expertise, explain and educate us on the types of embroidery, the inspirations, the role of India's influence on embroidery and the work you've been doing. Thank you so, so much. We've got so much gratitude and we're honored to have you today. And I think more honored, the fact that you are so invested into developing our community even further. I mean, your employment initiatives, your employment creation initiatives is just commendable. It needs to really be soaring. And if there's any way that we can support you, we will. And best of luck for everything else going forward. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The honor is all mine. And I think job creation should be #1 on our priority list. And thank you so much for these wonderful, kind words and for having me on this platform to share my journey. And I'm honored. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Harounji and Sheetalji, for that very interesting experience. Thank you so much, Harounji, for just opening up more of yourself and taking us through your journey and for being such an how could I put it, an impeccable gentleman in the diaspora and for just trending out there. Thank you, Harounji and Sheetalji, for this very interactive session of program of Pravasi Samvaad. With that, we've come to the end of episode 4 of Pravasi Samvaad. I'd like to invite Mr. Sipiwe Mchunu from the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban to render this evening's vote of thanks.
Namaskar. Greetings to all of you. On behalf of Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban, I am so honored today to deliver a vote of thanks on our 4th episode of the program Pravasi Samvaad, meaning Diaspora Dialogue. Allow me to thank our online guest, firstly Mr. Haroun Hansrot, a South African designer. Harounji, thank you very much for sharing your wonderful story on your work of designer. And also allow me to thank Dr. Sheetal Bhoola, UKZN academics who was having the interaction with Haroun ji. It was very wonderful interactions. We learned a lot, and we wish Haroun ji all the best to the journey of designing. To Director of Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Sristi Harinayan, Sri Piyush Kandewal, again, Dhanyavad for taking part on today's program. To all our online viewers, we'd like to say thank you for taking part on today's program. You are kindly advised to visit ICCR Devon Facebook page for all cultural activities organized by Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center in Devon. Once again, Haroun ji, Sheetal Bhoola ji, thank you. To all of you, have a wonderful evening. Namaskar.